Hello, Thrive Church. Welcome to Small Group. Tonight we're going to be looking at a very interesting passage from Matthew 8:18 to 22, and it's talking about the cost of following Jesus. Now I'm going to invite you to turn to your game booklet, and it's from Tuesday, July 16th. So I'm going to ask that we read it all together. Verse 18. When Jesus saw the crowd around him, he gave orders to cross to the other side of the lake. Then a teacher of the law came to him and said, "Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go." Jesus replied, "Foxes have dens and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head." Verse 21. Another disciple said to him, "Lord, first let me go and bury my father." But Jesus told him, "Follow me and let the dead bury their own dead." Very, very interesting passage. And for more, we're actually going to invite JB to speak to us. So let's welcome JB.
How's it going, everybody? Really glad to be here with you. And as Shara just read from Matthew chapter 8, we're looking at the cost of following Jesus. And here in verse 18, we see that Jesus is becoming increasingly popular, and he's making a name for himself. He is very much in popular demand, and people are following him. In fact, there's a teacher of the law, an expert in the Jewish law, in verse 19, who even comes up to him and says, "Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go." Now, if you're Jesus and you've got this teacher of the law who's maybe a prominent guy in the religious society, and he's saying, "I want to follow you," Jesus, you'd think he'd say something, "Oh, right, good job. That's exactly what you want to do." Or, "Fantastic, that is good news." But instead of encouraging him, instead of, in any way applauding this man's commitment to follow Jesus, Jesus has such a different reply than anything you could expect. Instead, Jesus says something that is, in many ways, one of the more misunderstood or hard to understand statements in the Bible. Jesus replies in verse 20, "Foxes have dens and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head." And so what Jesus is saying here is that, even basic animals like foxes and birds have a place to stay, but Jesus, the Son of Man, has no place to stay, no place to rest his head. He has no permanent home. And it's almost like he's giving a warning to this teacher of the law, and to anyone who wants to follow him, to say that if you want to follow me, you got to be prepared that life is not always going to be comfortable. You got to be prepared that you might not even have a permanent home. You got to be prepared to count the cost of following me. And in Jesus' case, he doesn't have a home. And it's a reminder to us that as Christians, we might live in an apartment or a condo or in a separate house, but the fact is this, is that for as long as we follow Jesus, our home is not on earth. In the end, our ultimate home is in heaven. And it's a reminder that we should not make ourselves too comfortable or focus on being too comfortable while we're living this life on earth, because it's really not in the end about our comfort, it's about following Jesus. And there's another disciple in verse 21 who says to Jesus, "Lord, first let me go and bury my father." Now, this guy was probably someone who'd been following Jesus for a while. And maybe you might even relate to this guy. You've been following Jesus for a while. Maybe at the very beginning you were pretty excited about your faith, pretty passionate about your faith. But then as life goes on, you start to get a little bit distracted. And in this case, this disciple, he is thinking to himself about his family. And he says to Jesus, "Lord, before I continue to follow you, first let me go and bury my father." Now, you got to understand this, is Jesus, his response to this disciple is not, "Okay, yeah, go take care of your family and come back and see me when you're done." Or, "Yeah, just whatever you want, do whatever you want. I'm all about just making sure that you're happy, so just do what you want to do." That's not Jesus' response. Instead, Jesus has a pretty harsh response for this disciple. He says in verse 22, "Follow me and let the dead bury their own dead." Wow. Could you imagine, receiving that kind of statement from Jesus if you were that disciple? Now, you got to understand this, is that in all likelihood, this disciple, when he asked Jesus to first let him go and bury his father was not dead yet. His father was probably not even close to passing away. Instead, this disciple was basically saying, "Let me take care of my stuff first. Let me take care of the things that I want to do first, and hopefully when my father passes away, I'll get my inheritance, I'll get my safe, and then after I've done those things, then I will follow you." See, Jesus is challenging this disciple's priorities. His priorities were not Jesus first, but something else first. And it's a challenge for all of us who really do want to follow Jesus to say, what are our priorities? And Jesus says, follow me, let the dead bury their own dead. In other words, he's saying that, if you want to follow me, Jesus is saying, that you can't just do what you want to do. You can't just focus on what's convenient, but you need to focus on following me. Let the dead bury their own dead is a reference to say that, when you follow Jesus, you are no longer spiritually dead, you are spiritually alive. And the role and the duty and the responsibility and the call of someone who is spiritually alive is to follow Jesus. Those who are not spiritually alive, they can take care of the things that have really nothing to do with following Jesus. Let them take care of that. But you have a greater calling on your life, and that is follow Jesus. And so for us, it's a really good reminder as to what our priorities are. It's a really good reminder that following Jesus is not always going to be comfortable. It's a reminder that following Jesus requires a cost. And so, I hope this little teaching brings to light or helps us understand a little bit better some of the more hard to understand statements that Jesus makes in this passage. And we're going to ask you guys to go back to your small groups for a little quick discussion. And God bless you guys. Let's continue to follow Jesus no matter what the cost.